Congressman Kingston, Brian Pritchard, FetchYourNews.com. Thank you for sitting down with us today. We're at the Pickens County Republican Tomato Sandwich Picnic, and that's quite enjoyable. One nice afternoon.
I had more than my fair share, Brian. I actually ate the traditional sandwich, and then I just stacked a bunch of tomatoes together and ate them. And then just to prove that I could be a glutton, I went back for more tacos. So I had a good time.
Pickens County, several citizens came out today to hear all the candidates speak. You started out talking about being a good steward. Tie in why you're discussing being a good steward as a congressman and your aspiration to be senator and where that all ties in.
Well, I think, Brian, if you look at the senatorial race, we're all going to say we're against Obamacare. We're all for a balanced budget amendment. We're all for lower taxes. And so what I wanted to do is have people have an opportunity to get to know me personally. That I was raised in Athens, that my dad was from actually Brooklyn, New York, raised during the Depression, and he taught us as children to be frugal and to use the motto of waste not, want not, and he taught us to work hard. And so what I wanted the people to know is that, you know, as a child, having my first allowance at age 5 was 5 cents a week. And then when I got to be older, buying my own clothes, working outside the house, pinching pennies, learning all through high school and college to pay for my own Coca-Cola, my own pizza, my own movies, my own dates, and so forth. You know, that kind of work ethic, that kind of frugality is missing today. But as a member of Congress, I've done the same thing. I turn the lights off in our office when I leave the place. And I've returned over $1 million to the taxpayers in unused office rent, salaries, and expenses, trying to really be frugal when nobody is watching. And that's what we need in Washington, D.C. As chairman of the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, I cut spending $3.6 billion. And that's not a decrease in the increase. It was $3.6 billion less than the year before. And I think it's really important for all of us as Republicans, as conservatives, to sort of fight the battle from our own foxhole, do our part to advance the conservative cause by practicing what we preach when nobody's watching.
Let me ask you a question. You've said in 08 you voted no on the stimulus. You voted no on Fannie and Freddie Mac bailout, and you voted no on TARP. Why?
Well, I think it's important for us to be true to the conservative cause, and that can be more important than being true to the Republican Party. Here's why. It's easy to vote against Obamacare. It's easy to, if you're a Republican, it's easy to vote against the Obama stimulus program. It's easy to vote against a lot of the Obama proposals because it doesn't challenge our political base. But when I voted against the Bush stimulus plan, which was $168 billion, by the way, in May of 08, there were very few Republicans that opposed it. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, was the bailout of that was very pushed by Republicans. A lot of our own business groups wanted that bailout, but it was $200 billion, and I voted no. The Wall Street bailout, as you know, we had Republicans all over the place, and it was a Hank Paulson, Bush's Secretary of Treasury. It was his proposal. He was the architect of it, and there were Democrats and Republicans on both sides, but I voted against that. And I brought that out today to show that I try to be consistently conservative rather than, you know, whatever the Republican Party's doing, because I think that's where we get in trouble as a party, when we forget who we are and what we went to Washington to do.
Well, I brought that up for a reason. How much pressure did you get on those votes from your own colleagues, the Republican side? How much pressure did you get when it comes time to vote like that from the moderate side of the party?
You get pressure all the time, and on the Wall Street bailout, Vice President Cheney personally called me, and it's a rare thing. And I told him, and I'm a Dick Cheney fan, and I said, you know, Mr. Vice President, the old-fashioned American citizen, I believe, that when the President of the United States asks an American citizen to do something, the only answer is yes. And here you are, calling really on behalf of the President, but I'm in an embarrassing position. I have to tell you no. And interesting thing about it is Dick Cheney and I remain friends and have a healthy respect for each other to this day because I was shot straight with him. I did not waste his time. And I think one of the keys to standing up to the pressure is to be philosophically consistent and tell sometimes our own friends, I can't do that, and here's why. And I think you gain more respect in the long run doing it that way.
As senator, because that's one of my questions, as senator, if the Democrats maintain majority, how do we deal as senator with the moderate side of the Republican Party? Because most people consider, most people in the state of Georgia on the Republican Party side consider Saxby Chambliss and Johnny Hutchinson as moderates, not strong, and I don't want to put them together, but the seat that you were running for is Chambliss retiring. Most people would consider him a moderate. How will you deal with that side of your own party in there? And can you give me a couple names of senators you would stand with that you've seen what they like? What do you like?
Well, I think you can push them along in a, I was in the business world. I was on commission, 100% commission. I sold insurance for a living, and I learned that you can't call somebody a name and have them buy insurance from you. And similarly, you can't go up to a senator, whether they're Democrat or Republican, and call them names publicly and then try to get them to vote with you. I think you have to be persistent, you have to be professional. When I cut the spending on agriculture, and by the way, the agriculture constituency in Georgia is Republican, and as a guy who represents a lot of agriculture, it's sometimes difficult to say, no, you can't do this. But we cut that spending, $3.6 billion, and I negotiated with Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin's one of the most liberal Democrats there is in America today, and he's a party leader. He's not just a liberal, but he's a guy whose job it is to make Republicans look bad. But I would not let it go. We went back and forth for 3 months before we got our way. And at the end of the 3 months, the interesting thing is when we finally got to the point where, okay, the deal's done, he told me it was the most member-to-member interaction he had had in 5 years. So to answer your question, I think that the skills that I bring to the job as somebody who works on commission is that I am a persistent guy, and I'll keep pushing and pushing and trying to get our way. And I think that that's what we have to do as Republicans, to be bold in defense of our ideas, but at the same time, be salespeople and try to get people to realize that it's the right thing to do, rather than calling them names and making them feel bad if they don't go that way. But the Senate is a different body than the House, and but I think I will do well in that environment.
Let me ask you this question, and the reason I asked this is because it came up from another candidate. Karen Handel told me that, and she didn't mention you, but she just said combined. She said combined, the other candidates combined have over 40 years in Washington. How important is it to have legislative experience for this job?
I think it's very important. You're talking about a U.S. senator. You're talking about deciding our policy on taxes, deciding our policy on war, deciding our policy on health care. You're talking about decisions that affect everybody in their lives. You can predict that person by how they have voted in the past. And I have a strong rating, A+ with the NRA, for example. It's not easy doing that. It's the highest rating of anybody who's running for this office. I have 100% national right to life vote, and I have a record. I have 100% with the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and that's an indication of how I will vote as a U.S. Senator. But to give you even more of an answer on that, I know where Tajikistan is. And that might not mean anything to some candidates, but I think it's real important in today's world to never forget national security. I have represented 5 of Georgia's military installations. I serve on the Defense Committee. I have stood hard for soldiers training, soldiers equipment, veterans to get the proper education and job transition when they come home safely from a war. And I think it's important to have somebody who understands things from domestic policy to foreign policy in the U.S. Senate. And I would challenge somebody who makes the accusation that, you know, we've been there too long, therefore we're tainted. Have you visited the troops in Tajikistan? Have you been to Uzbekistan? Have you been to Afghanistan? Do you know what our troops are doing on the DMZ? Have you been to Djibouti? These are things that are important, and it's not just that the war is now in Djibouti or Yemen or in Iraq or Afghanistan, it's that it's at Fort Hood, Texas, or it's in Boston. And national security has to be something that the Republican Party owns, not something that we just, oh yeah, it's important. We have to own this issue.
Well, you know, a couple more questions if you have time, and I know you have a busy schedule and you have to get to other events. Obamacare, does it have to be totally dismantled? Is there good things that can come out of it? What do we do there with health care? Because, and I'll tell you why I say this, even the creator of Obamacare just recently came out and said it's a train wreck, okay? So we're starting to see the implementation of it causing a lot of problems that people said all along. So I know that was long, but can it be fixed? Can we adjust it? Or what are we doing?
I don't think Obamacare can really be fixed or adjusted. I think that we have to, as a statement of principle, dismantle it, replacing it with a program that gives universal accessibility and affordability to people. But I don't think the government should be the sponsor of health care. In countries that have socialized medicine, they have poor quality medicine. Most of the medical tourists in the world come to the United States of America. We all have friends who've been in Canada or been in England, and they'll tell you this healthcare system over there run by the government do not work. So if we're going to have medicine which is the best quality in the world at an affordable price, we cannot have the government running it. And so I do think we have to dismantle Obamacare, and I fought hard to do that. I actually had 17 healthcare town meetings during the implementation of it, and we had a great open mic exchange. I was not given the lecture as much as I was hearing from people about it. I think there's deep-seated resentment in the government coming between the patient and the doctor, and we have to repeal Obamacare.
One more question, and I promise I'll end.
I'm good. Listen, Brian, I'm having a good time in Pickens County. I got all day. I don't know what your hurry is.
Well, okay. Okay, the Senate, looks like the Senate is going to hand you in the House an immigration bill. So let's push next week forward, and let's say they've handed you an immigration bill in the House. What say you?
Well, I'm going to vote no on the Gang of Eight proposal, and I'll tell you why. It does not actually put border security first. It actually requires a border security plan. A plan for border security. We've been talking about this for 15, even 20 years. If you want to attack border security, I would start in Arizona. 51% of the illegal aliens come through in Arizona because of two reasons. Number one, it's public lands, and the Border Patrol isn't allowed to implement the normal arrest laws because it is kind of a national park protected wilderness area. The second thing is we actually left a gaping hole in the in the fence for animal migration. Think about it. Why build a fence if you're going to leave a gap in it? But we've done it so animals can migrate. And guess what? Human beings found out about it. 51% of the illegal aliens come through the Arizona border. We need to start with closing the gap in that fence. The second thing that's important is that 40% of the illegal aliens are actually people who came here legally, but they let their visa or their passport or whatever documents they have expire. And so you have to have interior security as well as border security. You have to start with that. And then I think you need electronic verification, which the Gang of Eight plan is very vague on. And I think if you are to have a guest worker program, which is a lot different than a pathway to citizenship, you should know who people are coming over here to work for, how long they're going to be, what they're going to do, and when they're going to go home, and who's responsible for them. And in our fruit and vegetable world, we have had H-2A and guest worker programs for many years. Now, we don't administer the law in a consistent manner, and that's what makes them difficult to have. But I think that that's a much stronger approach than the Gang of Eight, and I will vote no on the Gang of Eight.
In the 80s, we passed an amnesty bill. I think it was 86, if I'm right. We passed an amnesty bill. The ones that the ones that came through the amnesty bill then brought family members illegally over, and we're actually in our third generation. We're actually from 86 to now. That generation had children. Now this generation is having children, and we're into educating a third generation that comes out of the 86 amnesty bill. I guess the point is they're here. They are here. What do we do? I know. So I mean, that's so wide open. But I ask everybody that because they're here.
Well,
what are we going to do?
I think part of our assimilation of immigrants has to be what my uncle Nick Dessery, who was a Hungarian refugee, had to do when he came to America. He left Hungary to escape Hitler. He did not know English. He had to learn it on his own. He did not have a job. He had to find a sponsor who could help him get a job, and he had to promise that he would not take welfare benefits. And I think if we want to have a good immigration policy, we have to have a good work ethic, and we have to have a welfare reform policy that says, you know, if you're able-bodied, you've got to work. And what I think some of our concern is that the American Public Assistance Program right now is teaching people, generations of native-born plus immigrants, that, hey, you don't have to work. You can get public assistance from cradle to grave and just enjoy the benefits of somebody else's labor. And I think that's part of what we have to have for an immigration policy, but also for an assimilation, to send a signal out here that we're a country of workers and taxpayers and law abiders. And I think that's part of what we're missing right now in America.
Well, let me ask you this. And I want to ask it this way because I respect the answer you gave me, but I still want to focus on their here. And I'll tell you what I'm looking at. We do so many things, and I think it's not even a fair comparison, so don't take this wrong, but we do so many things in this country and local municipalities and states, and we'll use the word grandfather clause. Mm-hmm. So before this day, if you were doing something, it's okay in your grandfather clause then, and that's very popular. Most people go around and understand what the grandfather clause is. So I'm not advocating anything. I don't advocate anything. So I'm just thinking out of the box here a little bit. We are stuck on the word amnesty. And now I'm going to say this is an opinion of mine. We're stuck on the word amnesty. So really what I'm thinking is, no, I'm not saying Congressman give them amnesty. I'm not even telling you. I'm just saying, what do we do with the generation that's here that went through our education system? Because the United States government says we have to educate the child.
I think that if you're going to address that child, and if I'm hearing you correct, you're talking about somebody whose parents brought him over here when maybe he was 3 years old, and he went through Pickens County schools, and now he's got a southern accent, doesn't know anybody in Mexico, but he can't get a driver's license because he doesn't have a Social Security card. He can't get a job. The concern that we have as a nation, I think, is okay, if you say to him, you get a pathway to citizenship, does he become an anchor for the whole family? And I think part of it, we should be able to say something like, okay, that individual could have a pathway to being legal, which doesn't necessarily give him citizenship, but it does give him a legal status so that he can work. But it also cuts off the possibility that he becomes the anchor for family chain migration. And that was part of the problem in the 1986, is the people who were given amnesty became the anchors for family chain migration. Exactly. And so to me, where I think we could come together is dealing with that child, now young man or woman, in terms of can we make you legal without making you a citizen? And if you want to become a citizen, then set up a process where you get in the back of the line and you don't jump in front of others. But I think that one of my concerns is the same administration that brought us the AP spying or the IRS scandal or Benghazi or the NSA eavesdropping, that would be the same people who would administer this policy. and I don't trust them. And what I fear that they would end up doing is say, well, you know, this kid came here when he was 3. This kid came here when he was 19. And what about his sister? She, you know, I just don't think that this administration follows the laws that they disagree with. And that's what my concern is.
Well, the reason I asked that, and you hit the target. You started with a 3-year-old, exactly. And a 3-year-old comes to this country with their parents. They don't know they're here illegally, but we educate them. So we make an investment. I mean, when you go to school, and that's a whole other subject, our public school system, but when you go to school, you're making an investment in these children. So these local areas, we're here in Pickens County, has chose to make an investment, or has no choice in making an investment in that child up to 12th grade and graduate, and look at the money that's been spent on the investment, and then all of a sudden this kid can't get citizenship or whatever. So I guess that's why I will throughout the campaign is I will not force, but say, what are we doing with it?
You know, it's interesting. The Heritage Foundation just came out with a study that said if you legalize the 11 million, I think they use that number, nobody's 100% sure what it is, but of the 11 million illegals right now, that they would bring in a lifetime of tax benefits of about $3.1 trillion, but they would be eligible for about $9 trillion in public assistance benefits. So in a country where we borrow 42 cents for every dollar we spend and the national debt is 100% of GDP, it's not a good deal. But that's where that economic ladder and economic opportunity comes in. And we want to say to anybody, whether they're native born or a legal immigrant, we don't want you to come here for public assistance benefits. We want you to come here to maybe start at the fast food restaurants and end up owning a chain of them. You know, an interesting story that people have ignored in this debate is in the last 10 to 15 years, 50% of the hotels in America have become owned by Indians. And many of them are actually from the same state in India that came here. But it's 50%, it's actually over 50% of the hotels now. And so you ask, well, why did they come here? They came here because there was a great opportunity and they realized, hey, America, you can still make your dreams come true. And I think if there's a lesson there, it's to all immigrants that, you know, we want you to come and, you know, buy a mom and pop operation, whether it's a hotel or fast food operation or whatever, start at the bottom floor and work your way up. There are now multi-millionaires in Atlanta, Georgia, who are Indian born, who came to America to experience the American dream. And I think that's where our policies should be, is that come here to contribute, come here to participate in the opportunity of capitalism.
Congressman, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.